This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Jouar.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is Wednesday, June 27th, 2018. I am in Frankfurt, Germany, with two very special guests. I've got Jason Cipriani here.
Hello.
And I have Peter Gauden here, and Peter Gauden is from Huawei.
I am. Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jason, who do you write for these days?
I freelance for a bunch of different places.
That's
ZDNet,
right.
CNET, IGN, Tech
You've
Radar.
been everywhere.
Can we just
Mashable
go
back in the day.
Mashable, Fortune Time. I mean, we could probably fill up this entire podcast just talking about places I've freelanced for.
You've been around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, quite literally on this trip, yeah.
Fantastic. So there we go. Peter, I want to ask you a little bit about your background, because a lot of people will just assume you work for Huawei, whatever. But I think the reason I have you on the show, and I'm grateful you can be on, is because you have this breadth of background in imaging and smartphone imaging. You worked for some pretty interesting companies and some interesting products. You want to run us through some of them?
I have been around a bit myself as well.
All right.
Yeah, so I've been in the tech industry for just about 15 years. Seen some things. I've worked in the past for a number of other Asian smartphone manufacturers. Been involved in some really interesting projects. Some great successes in the past. I was lucky enough to be involved with the LG Chocolate project.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
That's a blast from the past, right?
I sold plenty
Blast
of those.
from the past.
Yeah.
And also lucky enough to be working at HTC and involved in the 1M7, which I think kind of changed the shape of things for HTC for a while. So I was quite lucky to be in at that time as well. And now working for Huawei. So I'm part of a global team. So I'm a senior global product marketing manager, which a little bit like you, Miriam, I'm a bit of an evangelist, right?
Yeah.
So I'm the translator, the guy that kind of sits in between the engineers and the marketeers, and explains to the marketeers what the engineers mean when they say stuff. But I do that for a number of different stakeholders, I guess would be the term. So I get the privilege to sit and talk with you guys, both before and after launches, and also with the carrier networks, our customers, and even luckily consumers as well.
That's awesome.
I was privileged not. So it was actually last week. One of the things that Huawei advocates that all of us do is to actually spend some time in a real smartphone store, talking with consumers on the street. What do they think about devices? What do they think about Huawei? And just kind of learn and understand, so that we get a real feeling for what's actually going on.
That's very cool. So I want you to walk us through some of the history behind the Huawei Leica partnership. And I will preface this by explaining to the listeners, I am in Frankfurt for a very specific reason. Huawei brought a bunch of us tech journalists out to see the Leica headquarters, to visit Leica headquarters today, and get a feel for what Leica does and how they do it. And it was really remarkable, right, Jason?
It was amazing.
I mean, it blew my mind. I'm a camera nerd, so it was pretty awesome. And so, this is also why Peter is here. And so I think the listeners would love to hear the story. And how did this come about, this partnership? And, how did it evolve towards what we have today, which is the P20 Pro, which is what we really want to talk to you and kind of ask you some questions about, because there's so much about this phone that is kind of unknown. I mean, it's magical. It does amazing things, but we don't know how it happened. So I want to pick your brain about that.
Sure. So, I can start from Huawei's perspective, and I know the guys from Leica are not here to tell their own story, but I can give you a little bit of an insight into how that came about for them as well. I guess one of the things that really makes Huawei different is our approach to knowledge and partnership within in the business. We have a philosophy called combined wisdom. So the understanding is that no single person can know everything. So actually a shared wisdom is far more intuitive and far more powerful. And we apply that a number of different aspects. A good example of that is actually we have a system where we have 3 rotating chairmen within the organization. So they each take a time at the helm of the company. And we get that combined knowledge, but we also do the same thing when it comes to our partnership basis as well. At Huawei, we can build some amazing technology. We can build some brilliant cameras, but we also know that there are some real experts in photography that have been around for much longer than Huawei has, who has some really great insights.
Right.
So about 4 years ago, so 2014, we were looking at how we took the next step in smartphone photography.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that we could do that really defined Huawei as a brand when it came to smartphone photography? So we were looking at who else was in that photography space, who had a very shared experience and a shared understanding with Huawei. And very quickly, we could see that there was one particular brand that actually shared a lot of Huawei's philosophy, not only in terms of its dedication to engineering and its obsession and passion with engineering, because Huawei has been around for 30 years. We were an engineering-based company,
Right.
making network-based stations, and that's kind of our lifeblood. That's what we know and what we feel very, very comfortable with, and that space that we feel very comfortable with. And that brand happened to be Leica. Obviously, it's a German brand. Their dedication and detail to engineering is second to none. At the same time, it was quite interesting because Leica was seeing the same thing in the photography space as well for themselves.
Right.
So they've been around for quite some time, since 1840s.
Wow.
So a long, long time in their business. And they also have this very same approach to Huawei, that actually it's the end product. It's the photograph which is the hero out of all of this. Giving a consumer a tool to be able to take the best picture possible was something that both Huawei and Leica really, truly believed in. So they were also at the same time looking around for a new way to kind of develop their business a little bit in terms of how do they help smartphone photography? In what way can they continue to shape and define photography as it morphs and changes and evolves through time?
Absolutely.
They had a number of opportunities that were very different to what we were proposing to them. So a lot of people were discussing just pure licensing deals, and that's what neither Leica nor Huawei really wanted. We wanted a really deep collaboration that actually allowed both companies to produce something amazing.
Right.
The first meeting was quite interesting. 4 years ago, and roughly a very similar time, and we know that because, of course, there's World Cup going on. And
right.
Also at the same time of the first meeting, there was also a World Cup going on. And the day that the very first meeting between senior management of both Huawei and Leica took place, actually here again in Wetzlar in Germany at the Lights Park, the Leica's headquarters. It was a very quiet day around there because Germany happened to be playing. So it was quite an interesting meeting from a Huawei perspective, kind of turning up and, okay, is it normally this quiet here? And the Leica guys had to reassure them that no, this was quite a unique experience.
Right.
We do have employees.
Yeah, we do have employees.
They're just busy with football right now.
Exactly. But it actually took 2 years from that point where we've had that first meeting to the P9, which was the first device which was launched by Huawei with a camera co-engineered by Leica. And that term's very important, actually. It's co-engineered.
Right.
It's a combination of efforts of both companies together, hand in hand, to produce the camera systems when we put the co-engineered by Leica actually on a device. So that 2 years of engineering, 2 years of working together, 2 years of getting to know each other's capabilities, looking at actually how we could combine experiences, expertise from both sides, both Leica and Huawei, into something which was quite remarkable. And that's when we launched the P9. And
the P9 was a breakthrough device. I remember being very excited about it, and that was the beginning of my somehow getting the devices from Huawei. I did not get think I got the Mate 8 was my first, and the P9 really was like, okay. And so, we're going to talk more about the P20, but what I actually have a question around the P9 was, who came up with the idea of combining two sensors, a monochrome and a color? Was that a Huawei thing or a Leica thing?
It's, as we said, it's a shared engineering. It's looking at actually that end product.
Mm-hmm.
How do we improve the existing quality of the image, but still deliver? And this is one of the really important things that you will have seen today visiting the Lights Park. When you go into their headquarters, it's not a showpiece for cameras. It's not a museum for cameras.
Right.
It's actually set up as a gallery because they understand that photography has to have character. It has to have personality.
Yeah.
It has to be emotive. And there are certain aspects that are born of Leica's specific photographic style. That is obviously, a lot of it has been in the past monochrome.
Oh yeah, I mean they have
not entirely monochrome based, but they have great expertise in black and white photography.
They have a monochrome digital camera. It's optimized for black and white photography, which is I mean, super awesome because we know it's super awesome, right? I mean, yeah. So this developed. I mean, we got the Mate 9 after that, and we got the P10 and the P10 Plus, and then we got the Mate 10 Pro.
Yep.
And here we are today with the P20 and P20 Pro.
Yeah.
And our focus primarily has been on the P20 Pro because it really does push the envelope and innovate, right? I mean, the P20, I think I actually used it quite a bit, and I was really stunned at how much of what I saw in the P20 Pro also came and applied to the P20. But I think the fact that you have that massive quad Bayer 40 megapixel sensor instead of a regular RGB 12 megapixel on the P20, it makes it very unique. And of course the optical
We did
zoom.
Really go to town on the P20
you
Pro.
went nuts. So and it's exciting. I think it's very exciting. So I want to know, from that perspective, thanks for the history, because I think a lot of people don't know and don't understand what was the incentive, and I think you made it very you made very clear. I want to know kind of like maybe how you got to the design decisions that were made of, these three lenses. I mean, I can understand, the monochrome and color combo and adding a zoom to that. That makes sense. But then how, why the 40 megapixel quad Bayer instead of, the trigono sensor? How do you come to that? And then, how did you come to like only OIS on the optical zoom lens, on the telelens, and then you did these, this incredible system called AIS that, when it was pitched to me by Huawei PR, I was like, I'll believe it when I see it. And I did, because I saw it, and holy crap balls, it was great. So these are some of the things I'm kind of curious, like how did you get there? And then, maybe Jason's got some questions after that.
I mean, I guess it all stems from the philosophy that we have that we invest a huge amount in research and development. I mean, over $10 billion last year.
Wow.
We ranked last year like 6th, I think, in terms of ranking of tech companies who are investing in research and development. But that's not done blindly. That's very targeted research and development that's done around the world based on consumer insights. It's based on understanding what consumers are not getting right now from current experiences and how to actually answer their pain points, solve those problems for them in sometimes very basic and simple ways, and others in very intuitive but also simple ways. One of the standout things I think you've probably seen coming in from the P10 and into the Mate 10 Pro was things like our philosophy around born fast, stay fast.
Mm-hmm.
Around, actually, I don't want my device to slow up over time.
Yeah.
That's a real issue, right? People are using their devices and having it, month after month just get laggier and laggier. So that's one thing that we looked at solving, and we started using machine learning to understand how we can optimize system performance and really fine tune that for how you use your device individually. Another pain point, for example, is about battery.
Mm-hmm.
Mate 10 Pro, and then obviously now the P20 series, arguably the best, longest lasting batteries on the market to date. One of the biggest things that most people have an issue with is either they're hunting around for a charge point day by day, or in their backpack they've got a brick of a battery pack just sitting there waiting for that moment where midway through the day they're going to have to plug their device in.
Yeah,
And
I have one.
it's gone now
me too.
with Huawei devices. So we look at how we can actually solve problems from a consumer perspective. And we turned that research and development into the photography space as well.
So what were the pain points you identified for photography at the time that the P20 Pro was kind of being ideated?
So one of the biggest things is, of course, about low light photography. Photography, you want it to be robust. You want to have a camera in your pocket that you know that any time of the day you can pull it out and you're going to get a really, really good picture. So we looked at the most robust camera system, and this is not just talking about just the sensors. It's a combination of actually how we apply the sensors,
optics,
how we do the optics, how we run the dual image signaling processors on the Kirin chipset. It's then how we also incorporate AI into that. The entire camera ecosystem developed all in one to look at issues that people have when they're taking photographs. Blurry issues, low light issues, and trying to use all of our expertise to actually solve those problems. So things like the sensor we're talking about, the massive 40 megapixel sensor, but actually the default setting is down to 10.
right?
Because we are increasing the size of the pixel.
Yeah.
And you are quite familiar with photography and you understand this, and you probably do as well. And it's quite difficult for everybody to understand the game of numbers.
Right.
People understand a bigger number is better. So yeah, okay, I understand 40 megapixels is better, but why do you do 2? And why do you do 10 megapixels?
Yeah.
And it's because those pixels are actually almost double the size of the average pixel that is on other smartphones.
Correct.
Which the size of the pixel equates to how much light can be absorbed by the sensor. And photography is very simple in its science. Light equals photographic information. The more light that can be absorbed, the better quality of information that the sensor is able to pass to the ISP, to the image signaling processor, to then define that image that you see on your screen and is captured. And it's a simple science in that's not really changed even from when the very first pinhole cameras were developed. It works exactly on the same principle.
Right, and that kind of leads into one thing I know we had talked about earlier was night mode on the P20 Pro is just ridiculous to take pictures. And so if I'm going to take a night picture on any of the competitors' phones, you usually have to have some sort of tripod and have it set up so the phone is completely still. And because I'm going to have to do some sort of long exposure shot and open up the aperture for 2 or 3 seconds to collect all the light, and any blurriness is going to come across in that photo. Whereas on the P20 Pro, I switch to night mode, hit a button, and even if I'm a bit shaky, the picture comes out pretty clear. But not only that, but I could use that same mode in well-lit conditions, and it's not overexposed. So can you kind of explain how exactly that happens?
Yeah, how does it work? I mean, I know you can't give us a secret sauce,
right?
But I'm really curious. Like, I understand why you did it because it's the first time in a long time that we've solved a real problem. You don't need a tripod to do a handheld long exposure anymore,
and I love that.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
But how did you implement that? Like, are you just shooting a whole bunch of photos and lining them up in real time using edge detection and AI and whatever? And because that's the thing that I find kind of magical about it.
It is similar to that. So we are using AI an awful lot in that process. So not only are we incorporating the AIS, which is the stabilization, which helps with that handshake, but the AI's capability of recognizing what it's looking at. And this is one of the things that we've developed even from the Mate 10 Pro, which has evolved into what we have in the P20 Pro now, which is called Master AI. So that kind of gives the camera the ability to understand what it's looking at. So what happens when you're having that between 4 to 6 second exposure? So that obviously the shutter is open, light is coming in. The AI is going frame by frame, looking at all the objects that form part of that image. It's recognizing the definition of that object. It's understanding edge-to-edge movement and therefore placing that object actually where it should be. And in doing so, as the light information keeps flooding in, it's adding that information into what the AI is seeing, defining the edges, so that as the light brightens that image and you then night becomes day near enough, the edges of the shapes stay clear, stay defined, and all that blurring is then eradicated.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's super effective.
Yeah, one of the things I find interesting about it is every time you use it, the countdown timer that pops up on the shutter button is different. So it adapts to every single shot, and it's never the same process every time. It's not just a mode in the camera that you hit a button and it follows it no matter what. It adapts to whatever you're shooting.
Because obviously we have light sensors there to assess the ambient light that's around. It also incorporates a color temperature sensor, so that even the light, the very little light that may be around, when the camera captures what it sees, it's very natural to the image that you're actually seeing as well, because it's able to assess the true color temperature of the light that's around it.
And I for those of you listening who don't have a P20 Pro yet and are kind of curious, the other thing that's cool about night mode is that you can override some of it. Like there are settings, you can force the ISO, you can set the duration of the shot. You can also interrupt the shot early by tapping on the shutter again. And Peter and I were talking over dinner just now, something that I've done a few times, but he's encouraging me to do more often.
I am encouraging you to do
daytime use of night mode.
Yes.
It's like
sounds counterintuitive.
It's HDR on steroids.
Exactly. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Cool.
But it is really good for dynamic range.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit, and I want you to elaborate a little bit on AI, on the AIS, because obviously there's OIS on the zoom lens, but there are rumors that there's OIS on the other two, but that you're not, whatever the rumors are, you're not doing that on the other two.
Correct.
And so
we're not doing that.
So the magic of AIS is really something special. It's the first time I've seen stabilization work so effectively. Literally, when you use the P20 Pro and you kind of bring it up, especially in zoom mode, you notice it very obviously where it's like it's shaky and then all of a sudden, boom, it gets super steady. And it's, I guess, when the AIS finally has done enough analysis to kick in.
Correct.
And so walk us a little bit through, obviously that's being used in night mode too, but walk us through some of the things that were done to come up with this system, because it's really, I think it's a totally competitive differentiator for you guys.
It is. It's a really interesting system. Again, it's about defining and recognizing the edges of
Things.
the objects that the camera is seeing.
Yeah.
And then being able to say, okay, well, that should be there, and it needs to stay exactly where that is. And then it's also about being able to start to be predictive. This is one of the things about artificial intelligence that we are evolving a little bit further, is its predictive nature. Even though your hand may be moving in quite a random manner, the whole camera system is able to say, okay, doesn't matter if it moves up or down, I know that this edge stays here.
Right. And that's
and it locks it in on that. And the way to really, really see this is to go into your 5x zoom.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about the telephoto lens. I mean, you obviously have 3x optical zoom, but then when you go into 5x, I mean, that's a lossless zoom at a greater distance than the majority on the market.
For sure.
And you'd think at that point, that's when your handshake is going to be the most acute.
Uh-huh.
And as you say, after a couple of seconds, the whole AIS really gets to grips with what's going on, and then you just see the shot solidify.
Right.
It stabilizes, and it's really, really clear. And interestingly enough, when it's doing that, there's also all sorts of other AI working as well. So if you're, for example, for a long distance away, taking a photo of a poster, the AI is actually recognizing that what you're photographing is text, and therefore it applies the algorithm that it's aware of for text. So it sharpens the edges of that text and makes sure that actually it's clearly defined, because it understands what it's actually seeing.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty spectacular. And I was wondering, I've always asked myself, again, my engineering brain kicking in, are you guys doing any analysis of the gyro motion as well, in addition to the edge detection?
That's a good question that I don't actually know the answer to.
Okay, cool. Jason, you had some questions, I think.
Yeah, I think one of my questions is, and I'm not asking you to go into future products at all. I just want to get more insight into the decision-making process that goes into when to add another lens. I mean, we just had rumors come up in the last couple of days that LG has 5 lenses coming out on a camera. You guys have 3 on the P20 Pro. At one point, does it make sense, or what considerations go into trying to make sense of when to add another lens? Like, you know,
this comes back again to that whole consumer insights and understanding the evolution of photography.
Sure.
Having Leica as a partner is actually brilliant for us because they understand photography. They've been in photography from almost 100 years ago. So the first small format Leica camera was produced in produced in 1914, the very first one. It's just over 100 years. And photography has changed an awful lot in that time. And actually, photography in the last 5 years has changed quite dramatically. So it's understanding the requirements of consumers, the requirements of this evolving photography state. And we look at each implementation in isolation and how, you know, we can again address issues that are coming up from consumers in what they want from their photographic capability. That's why we integrated the third camera with P20 Pro, because we saw that, okay, dual camera system's really good, but there are some issues in terms of people not being able to reach that little bit further.
Yeah.
And that telephoto lens is fantastic. The times that I've used it, and it's you think, you know, when would you use a telephoto lens? I've actually used it a couple of times, and this is a really good example. I went on holiday with my family a couple of weeks ago to northern France, and quite randomly, I was leaning into the front of my car, and I felt something on my shoulder, and my wife said to me, hang on, stay still. And a very small bird had just come and landed on my shoulder.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what's going on? And I turned, and the bird flew off, and it landed in a bush, like about 5 or 6 meters behind me. And I thought, well, if I move, it's going to fly off. But I want to have a photo of that, because I want to say that that landed on my... So out came my P20 Pro. Out came the zoom. Without needing to move, I was able to actually get much, much closer and take a photo of that little tiny bird that had just been on my shoulder.
I think the only other question I have is more of a software-based question in regards to, I mean, we're sitting here talking about how great of a camera the P20 Pro is, but it's a smartphone at the same time, so there's software driving a lot of shortcuts and various things. Right now you have a volume button shortcut to launch the camera when the phone is locked. So you double press the volume down button, camera launches, start shooting. What are the chances of getting that move to the power button that's an all-time camera shortcut? So whether the phone's unlocked, in use case is I'm in messages, texting someone, bird lands on my shoulder and flies off, and I want to take a quick picture. Instead of hitting home button, finding the camera app, launching it, and taking a picture, double tap the power button, my camera's launched, ready to go.
I mean, obviously, we do take consumer feedback very seriously, and we look at how we can work with the trends that are coming up. If we see this is something that's a major issue, then obviously that's something that will feature in our considerations. Already, as you said, we have the double tap on the volume down key that if the device is off, actually it's super, super quick, 0.3 of a second to actually open. And we've got a quad focus system as well. So there's 4 types of autofocus working on the camera. So even in that 0.3 of a second, camera's focused already and taken a perfectly crystal clear shot, which is quite amazing. And when you're in the camera app itself, obviously you can then choose volume keys, can do things like zoom in, zoom out, and you can take a photo when you're in the camera app.
Yeah.
But I understand your personal pain point on
on the bird,
on the bird, the bird story. Being able to,
I mean, I think if I had to make a wish list for like the P30 or maybe the Mate, 20 or whatever.
Do I need to get my pad out now?
Well,
just so that I can take notes.
It's going to be on audio, so I mean, I would say I would add a 4th lens in the back that's a wide angle.
Okay.
Like LG is doing, because I find that I'm often in certain situations where I'm close up as a journalist to something and I need to take a photo and I can't step back because people are going to get in the way.
Okay.
And LG has delivered very well on that over the last few generations of their products. Of course, they don't have a telelens, so they're doing it half-assed too.
Okay.
But I think telelens, the way you're doing it, is not half-assed at all. And if you did the same thing with a wide angle on top of that, I think it would be great. The other thing I'd love to see is a dedicated camera button that can be double tap for startup. For
Takes
me,
away
that
the power button
and it would have
problem.
to be dual detent, where I can make a camera where I half press and it focuses, and I can lock focus and exposure, and then reframe the shot really quickly. Because as a photographer, both camera, real camera and phone, honestly, that's one of the most instinctual, natural way of reframing a shot. Is you focus in the middle and you half press and you just refocus. Now the average person won't care. But I think the average person, there's a lot of things in the P20 Pro that we're seeing that are super creative product things. But at the same time, you're addressing the just mash the button and get a good picture audience, right? And I think you could expand that by having that dedicated button. I mean, basically, if LG and Samsung can put a dedicated assistant button, you can put a dedicated
That is not
button.
used at all.
I think it's an interesting point you made there about the kind of philosophy that we're approaching when it comes to photography in its instance is that single press of a shutter button, the end result, we don't want people to have to overthink their photography. Just press that shutter button and know and trust that you've got an image in your gallery that looks fantastic, that a professional would be proud of, and that you can post immediately without needing to do any editing, to do anything straight away. And I think that's the panacea for a lot of consumers, is they just want to be able to press that shutter button and know they can post instantly. And P20 Pro is perfect for that, with the combination that we've got of AI, not only recognizing all the different scenes and objects that we do, and therefore tuning the image capability for that, but then also things like even the little bit of assistance that we give you. Because one of the things we haven't spoken about yet is the fact that actually we can provide, or AI can provide on our cameras, the ability to guide a novice photographer into how to get a much better picture. Like if we're taking a group shot, for example, a simple mistake, and I would still consider myself to be a fairly novice photographer. Simple mistake is you think that you've got a group of people and you need to fill your screen with that group of people to get a really good shot.
Right.
Now, actually, because of the work that we've been doing in the aesthetics of photography alongside Leica, is actually to understand that if you just took a little bit of a step back and gave some space around that group, it actually makes a much nicer picture. And to give you that guide, there's a little rectangle which appears,
totally,
and it prompts you. It says, actually, put these people inside this rectangle, and the image that results from that is actually going to look much, much nicer. And it's things like that that I think is really resonates with people. How to really take amazing photos and not need to be an expert photographer.
Absolutely. I think it's always very tough. I think you see it in Apple's products, right? Their camera is really good, but it's really optimized for the basic use, right? You smash the button. But those of us who want to be more creative really struggle with an iPhone, because we know it's capable of some really good things, but we don't. You have to install third-party apps, and it's never the same experience.
Apps to get.
Whereas with your phone, both sides are served.
Yeah,
and I
we
know
have the Pro mode,
and it's hard. But and I know it's hard when I say add a shot, double shutter key, because that might add confusion to the customer. And I get it, all that. But I think that these are the things I would do: wide angle lens, dedicated shutter button. And there's very little else I'm unhappy about. I mean, a lot of the software stuff you do right now, all the AI-based stuff, is only going to get better. Processors are going to get faster. ISPs are going to crunch even more numbers. So you can't go wrong. In terms of hardware, I think you have the right recipe. So I'm looking forward to what comes out of the next.
But remember,
generation.
hardware is only one part of the whole equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have an eye on that, but then we're thinking about everything else, including software, including AI, including lenses, and everything, and being able to just come up with the best camera possible.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Peter, I know you got other things to do. I really appreciate you being on the show, taking an entire half hour to spend with us to tell us all about some of the history and what your background was, and the P20 Pro and how it came to be, and some of the decisions that are made, as this is really, this is stuff that my listeners are gonna really enjoy. So thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's always a good time learning something in depth like that about a new phone. It's been a pretty eye-opening experience over here. First we're in Milan and now we're in Frankfurt. And the rest of the crew is taking off to Paris tomorrow. Yeah. I'm really jealous about that.
Damn.
But I'm heading home, and yeah, I mean that Peter's a good guy. It's really interesting input.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed speaking with him this last 2 or 3 days and getting to know him. I mean, his breadth of knowledge is insane. And we had a Q&A session this afternoon, remember?
Yeah.
And at the Leica thing, just filling in the listeners here. And we asked some pretty tough questions.
Yeah.
I mean, it was way more detailed than what we were able to deliver here for you guys. But I asked about like why, it's clear to me that there is, OIS modules for the two main sensors as well, main lenses, and that they're not being used. Whether they're actually wired up or not, I don't know.
Right.
But it's clear to me that they are there, and so they, wouldn't elaborate on whether we were right or wrong. But that was a question that came up. That was a pretty big debate for a bit. We talked about what else? What was there? Do you remember?
There was just a lot about how well Leica and Huawei work together. I mean, they both have teams that travel back and forth between the two locations quite frequently, and it seems like I definitely came in with the impression that it was just a branding type of deal, and maybe Leica kind of gave some advice and input once in a while. And listening to everyone talk during the Q&A today, it's a little bit more than that. It's actually a lot more than that.
Yeah,
and I feel confident in saying that Leica definitely has some input, and Huawei definitely has some input, and they work closely.
Absolutely. Another thing that was discussed, by the way, I'm going to fill you in quickly, was that the lenses used on the P20 Pro are actually plastic lenses.
Not glass.
And they're not manufactured by Leica.
Or
not
Huawei.
even by Huawei, exactly. They're manufactured by a third-party contractor in Asia on spec.
Yep.
And the reason for that is volume of manufacturing. We found out today they sold 8 or 9 million P20 Pros or P20s.
P20s. They didn't
General
break down
category.
Yeah, they didn't break down the numbers, but
that's
9 million?
A lot of effing phones, okay? And so, I mean, we saw Leica's setup, right? It's super focused on their high-end cameras and lenses and sensors and optics and
hand painting lenses.
Exactly. So there's no way they could do that kind of volume.
No way.
And so it makes perfect sense. And it's interesting. One of the things that the Leica person, whose name now escapes me, at the Q&A said was, to him or to them, to Leica, plastic is just another kind of material that they categorize as glass.
Yeah, that was when I asked if there was any differences in designing a lens and considerations they had to take in shaving it down and getting it clear enough and all of that between plastic and glass, and the response was just that. Plastic is another form of glass.
Yeah, it's just easier to work with.
Right.
So there you have it. So don't necessarily assume that not having glass lenses is a bad thing, because we know the P20 Pro can certainly deliver. And I mean, I've got to give kudos to Nokia for the Zeiss lenses on their phones, at least the old phones, where they did use some glass elements and it did add clarity to the photos, because I don't think at the time the plastic manufacturing was quite as advanced as it is today.
Yeah, lots changed.
Yeah, and of course processing, sensor, everything else. So we got a bunch of news topics, Jason. I'm going to bring them up because we should cover them real quickly. First of all, I want to talk about the BlackBerry KEY2. I reviewed it for Geekspin.
Yeah, so what did you think of the BlackBerry KEY2? I have one. I did not bring it over here with me. I refuse to try to file something in Europe and time zones being messed up. So I have very limited hands-on time with it, but what were your thoughts?
So, I said it in my headline, right? It's a phone for the fans, right?
Any BlackBerry right now is a phone for the fans, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I feel that this one particularly, I feel like, look, last year, the Priv, let's rewind a bit. The first BlackBerry phone running Android was the Priv. I mean, that was significant and had modern features and had a hardware keyboard. And it was a slider, portrait slider. It was a Priv. And it felt to me more like, hey, we're BlackBerry, we made an Android phone.
Right.
Whereas then the KEY1 came out last year, predecessor to the KEY2. The KEY1 was like, this is us, we made a BlackBerry phone. It just happens to run Android because it's a good OS to have these days, because everybody has it and there's a great ecosystem. Which is a very big difference between we made an Android phone and we're BlackBerry versus, we're BlackBerry and we used Android to make a phone.
Right.
And so the KEY1 as such, I think, was a bit of an icon because it was a breath of fresh air. It was like, we're going to do this the old way, like no sliders. This is just like a BlackBerry Bold 9900 or like a BlackBerry Classic or even the original Bold 9000, where we have a screen and a keyboard below. But we're going to try to use all the things that are changed since then to make a phone that's actually good. And I think the Key1 hit that mark. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. At the time, I liked it. I felt that it was a little pricey, and there were some issues with like low amounts of RAM. And I mean, you look at the reviews from back then, a lot of them agree. So when the Key2 was announced, we were all, I think, as tech journalists, pretty excited because we've all been pretty fond of the Key1, and we're like, okay, so this is going to fix some of the problems of the Key2. And in many ways they did. They doubled the RAM. They have a newer processor, which is faster and performs better. Yet the battery life is just as good. They kept the same size battery, blah, blah, blah. The industrial design on this thing is a huge leap forward.
It blows the
I
Key1
felt like
out
the
of the water.
Key1 was always a bit frumpy to me. And I used that word in the review, where it's like there were so many antenna lines and interrupted and differences in materials and the plastic end cap at the top.
It was almost a recycled priv that got smashed somehow, and it just didn't make any sense.
I mean, it wasn't bad, but it just was not. Yeah, it needed to be polished.
Yeah, right.
And wow, did they ever polish it? That industrial design on this thing, it's 7000 series aluminum or 7 series or whatever it's called. It's really nice. And it looks unique, and that's another bonus for it, right? And not just because of the keyboard, but because of the industrial design. So that's the good parts of this phone. Battery life, great hardware keyboard, and they've even enhanced with some functionality, which makes it better as a dedicated shortcut key now, which means you don't have to go back to the launcher to do a shortcut. You can do it from any app.
Well, and it's dual purpose, right? You could do a short press or a long press.
Correct, yeah.
To me, that's a little daunting initially to set up.
But
right?
once you know and you remember, it's good,
Yeah,
right? So that's all very good. But to me, the biggest issue I have with the BlackBerry KEY2, and I said that in my review, was that the display is the same as last year. It's a bit too small. It was a bit too small then. TCL is the parent company of BlackBerry, makes displays. They make their own displays. They could have made a custom display for this thing. They could have removed the capacitive navigation bar above the keyboard and below the screen, and made the screen just a little while. There's a lot of bezel on that sides of the screen, so that I could see a 4.7, 4.8, 5-inch even display on this thing. If you could make the front-facing camera and sensors a little less narrow, add a notch. Why not? I said that in my review.
Yeah.
But they could have done all this. And they could have also, the camera is a dual camera system this year. It's improved on paper in every way, adds a telelens, which, could be a very good thing. The problem is it has no OIS, first of all. And secondly, at least we'd expect OIS on the main lens. But on top of that, it just doesn't deliver the goods. Like a Moto G6 with a Snapdragon 435 is, honestly, takes slightly better pictures. and so it's like, I'm like, it's frustrating because all of this would be great if the phone cost $450.
But it doesn't.
But it costs $650.
Right.
That's flagship money. At that point, you're like, okay, I'm just going to buy a OnePlus 6 and call it a day. I mean, the OnePlus 6 530, it gets you Snapdragon 845. You get a great camera this year. You get like everything.
But you know what you don't get?
What?
Keyboard.
Oh, a keyboard. Yeah. So that's why I called it's the phone for the fans.
Yeah.
Because the only people who really care are BlackBerry fans.
Right.
And, BlackBerry in their marketing material said there's 4 users we kind of imagine for this phone. There's a fan, like people that are all used to BlackBerries and want a BlackBerry. Then there is like the business person who wants the security and privacy features. There's all these extra pieces of software on there that I personally think slow it down and shouldn't be there, but hey, what do I know? And that are really good, and that's kind of one of the users they imagine, the traditional enterprise customer that they've always had. The third one is a customer that wants something different. They want to break the mold from the glass sandwich monoliths, right? But I think that customer doesn't exist because that customer does not want a hardware keymet to differentiate. That customer wants the Oppo Find X, the Vivo Next. They want the phone with the weird camera that pulls out and
Right.
it bathes your face in infrared light and unlocks. Like, that's cool.
Something's moving forward and not
No,
kind of keeping
exactly.
half of it in the
Yeah.
past.
And then finally, the last customer they have is the messenger customer. Like, I'm social mediaing all day. I hate to tell you, but the social media people, they want a camera that freaking performs. I mean, Joshua Vergara himself, who is a huge fan of Key 1 and now the Key 2, said, and is the messaging kind of customer, said, yeah, I can't live with this camera. And I don't blame him, because it's kind of it's kind of underwhelming, and it's $650. That's the biggest thing. The Key 1 was $550. We could kind of forgive it.
Yeah.
Also, it's a year ago.
Right.
Like, things have changed so drastically in terms of camera imaging, every aspects of performance in this last year. So I'm like, ugh. I mean, read my review. I'll put the link in the show notes on Geekspin. It's I think I was critical, but I think I was fair. So have a look. And then, yeah, I think that's my take. You've played with it a little bit. What was your general feeling?
I spent 10 minutes setting it up. And the first thing that annoyed me and I found amusing is the fact that you have a hardware keyboard, but by default, anytime you activate a text field, the software keyboard pops up until you go in and disable that feature.
Yeah, so that's another thing. That's a default feature, yeah.
Why? You have that keyboard.
And speaking of which, that's the other thing. I mean, this is not just a Key 2 thing. For me, it's a Key 1 thing. Like, I have been wearing glasses since I was born, right? But I do have reading glasses that are really good, right? Like, my reading glasses give me 20/20 vision. I'm wearing them right now. With those glasses on, there's not enough contrast and size on the alt lettering on each key. Like the letter V has the question mark associated with it as well. Yeah. That little question mark is in there, but it's so faint contrast-wise, even with the backlight on, and so small that with my reading glasses, in most circumstances, I cannot tell. So now I know that V is the question mark. So I go Alt V and I get the question mark. But I pretty much have to memorize every single key.
Which is
and
a
when
process.
I'm typing really fast, it's really frustrating.
Right.
Especially because the numpad overlaps the QWERTY keyboard, the left side of it. And when you're trying to type a pin or something in your phone, the last thing you want to do is kind of go, how do I line this up again?
Yeah.
You just want something on screen. So half the time you get frustrated, you hit the symbol key, which brings up the virtual keyboard.
It takes up your screen.
And then it takes up your screen. And now you have a 4.5 inch screen with like a third to more than a third of it used up by and so it's like, but look, at the same time, I love what BlackBerry's doing. I'm glad they exist. I'm glad they're back. I'm glad they're doing their thing. I want to support them. What I really want from them, and I said in the review, is like, stop f***ing around. Give us a flagship. Price it for $850. Snapdragon 845, notch, big display, but still manageable in size. Put the hardware keyboard on there. Put OIS on 2 lenses. Put like 8 gigs of RAM. Like, just go nuts. Just f***ing do it.
Yeah. You have enough fans, right? Or that's one of their people that they always...
Because they're going to spend the money anyway.
Exactly. You may as well take advantage of it.
Like, it's kind of this hybrid between a flagship and pricing and a mid-ranger and its feature set. And it does some things really well, like performance and battery life, but then it does other things like camera and display kind of meh. And for TCL, was a display company, like, how can you do a meh display? Like, again, the Alcatel 3V, also made by TCL, which is a $150 budget phone, has a better display. And it's because TCL has a better display than the freaking BlackBerry KEY2.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
It is painful.
The other hang-up I have, and this goes for all BlackBerries, clear back to the Passport, is just how what do I want to say? How unforgiving physical keyboards are.
Yeah.
I'm used to hammering away on glass, and that software is going to figure out whatever the hell I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I get there's autocorrect and swipe and all this.
Yeah.
But look, I still have to be pretty damn precise on a physical keyboard to feel like I'm actually doing something and not just mashing buttons with my thumb and hoping something happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all that said, and even hearing your very candid feedback, I look forward to getting back home in the States and spending some quality time with the Key 2. BlackBerries always have a soft spot in my heart. I mean, I started writing about BlackBerries. That's how I got into this in the beginning. So there's always a spot there.
I'm just worried that this wasn't enough of an effort. It didn't correct enough of the things we had issues with last year. and because of that, they can't ride alone on the "we have fans" coattails.
Well, I mean, but you could have said that at any given point in the last.
Yeah, but last year at least it was the first, and there was I think when I see the media who are on this trip who are all reviewing the Key2, there's a whole bunch of us.
There was like 15 of them on the trip.
And we should have made a pile tomorrow. I'll take a photo, I promise. But like it's like I feel like, you know, we are not as excited this time around. Last year we really were. We were all at Google I/O using our Q1s.
Yes.
And the Google PR people didn't know what to make of us. They're like, wait a minute, why aren't you using your pixels?
Right.
You know? But it's just weird. It's like hard to explain, but it's like some of the excitement is gone, and that doesn't mean they're not gonna sell them. It doesn't mean they're not gonna address their core market. But I'm just concerned that to some extent I look, I could be wrong, but I think as tech journalists do have some influence in what we say, at least the tech savvy and early adopters who squarely overlap those BlackBerry fan, I hate to tell you.
Right.
We are going to influence them somewhat. And yes, of course, they're still going to go for the hardware keyboard, but how long can you kind of sacrifice the other stuff?
I agree with you 100%. There definitely was a kind of feeling to the Key2 this year.
I mean, I would rather them, you know, I put 3 gigs of RAM, a Snapdragon 435, like scale it down in performance, make it out of plastic or something, or half metal, half plastic like Moto does with some of their cheaper phones, and sell it as a curve replacement for 300, 250, 300 bucks. Then at least it'd be like, okay, you've got a little corner of the market
You
there.
still have your keyboard, you still have your security.
Yeah.
Have at it.
Go. But then I would do that 845 monster as well. But like that, you're trying to address the two sides with one device. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that
it's
balancing
diluting the whole thing.
Yeah, the balancing act.
Anyway, we got more stuff. You touched on this before. I'm not doing these in order, but you touched on the V40 rumors with 5 cameras. And I just wanted to point out the 5 cameras mean 2 in the front, 3 in the back. So it doesn't really, it's still 3 in the back like the Huawei P20 Pro. It has 4, but you said 3, but it's 4 if you count the front. So this is 5 counting 2 in the front.
Yeah.
So basically, this is a rumor we don't know, but this doesn't surprise me. The V10 had 2 dual front cameras. The HTC 12 has dual front cameras. It's no surprise that somebody would do that. And then, of all people, LG. And then they're going to keep the same arrangement in the back. In the back, they're probably going to have the wide, maybe a tele, and a regular, which would be cool.
I love the wide.
I love the wide. I hope they don't get rid of the wide, but they do need to add a tele.
Yeah, they do.
So I think that's what they're going to do. We're going to get normal wide tele in the back. And then we're going to get dual camera in the front, possibly to do what a lot of other people are doing with like Apple with Face ID, like depth perception using 2 cameras instead of
Face unlock,
instead of like projecting an array like Kinect style. And related to that, we got 2 other news items. And by the way, I'll put links to the LG rumors down below. The 2 other related items is that the Pixel 3 and Pixel 3 XL renders that have been circulating have also showed dual front cameras.
They have.
For probably what I think is going to be a real solid face unlock that can be used for payments. Hopefully, that's what I want.
That would be amazing. These renders, if this is what ends up coming out in October or whenever it is that Google's ready to refresh the Pixel line, if they're legit, I'm going to be pretty excited.
Me
the
too.
Way this looks.
So just walk the listeners through what we've seen. We've seen essentially the Pixel 3 looks like a Pixel 2 XL but shrunk down.
Right. Yeah.
And then the Pixel 3 XL has a notch.
It has a notch, and you could in the renders at least, you could very clearly see the 2 lenses. The Pixel 3 looks kind of like, actually my first initial thought when I saw it was a Galaxy S9.
Oh yeah, you're right, because does it have the curved edges?
It does look like it has curved edges, and I don't know if it's just the way the render comes across, but that was immediately what I thought. And off to the left on the top bezel are the 2 cameras there as well. But yeah, there's a pretty hefty notch on the Pixel 3 XL, I would say. Appear to both have USB-C and 18:9 aspect ratio.
Probably 19:9 on the one with the notch is what I'm guessing. Because that's what seems to be the trend. Up to 19.5:9 on some devices.
Oh wow!
Like the G7 from LG.
Yeah, the ThinQ.
The ThinQ. Oh god, this branding. I mean, that V40 is going to be called ThinQ. You know it because they're going to stick with that stupid branding.
What are they thinking?
But anyway, it looks interesting. These are rumors, and again, so we're kind of all talking about the same dual front cameras, Face ID. Vivo showed a new Face ID system that is very similar to what Apple's doing, using a dot projector and then getting time of flight data back And so this is interesting because like I wonder how much patent infringement is going on here.
Right. Yeah.
A, but who cares because it's Vivo and it's probably only going to make it to China.
Right.
But B, I hope it actually does get it outside of China. But B, the other thing that I think is interesting about this is that they claim they can recognize a face up to 30 feet away.
Was it 30 feet or 3 meters?
Yeah, that would be 10 feet away then.
Okay, yeah.
I don't remember. But
So
it's a distance that is like, wow.
It's ridiculous. And it uses 10 times the amount of dots that
Right.
Face ID uses
Correct.
on, or Apple uses in Face ID, which, look, Face Unlock in situations like this is amazing. I'm all for technology like this, and I hope, like you said, it makes it out of China.
I mean, for me, the thing that's been bugging me about all these Face Unlock things for Android so far is none of them, except for maybe the Oppo Find X, which is supposed to be coming to the US, so we'll find out when it does. That's the only one that I know of that's using something that really does measure depth. It's not a dot grid based, but
it's a little bit more secure.
None of them let you do payment with Face Unlock.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is the only one. To me, that's when we have that in the Android world, potentially augmented with a under the screen or in the back fingerprint reader, because that way it gives you people option, because Android's all about options. That's when we've hit the jackpot. Because to me, that's almost a year in the making now, because nobody's managed to match Apple yet. And so if this is true, what Vivo's, well, I mean, I'm sure it's true, but if Vivo can
they showed it off.
If they can actually bring it to us, then look, it's a super exciting year. I think. I mean, seriously, between like everybody going all screen or all screen partially with a notch and sliding cameras, face scanners.
Right.
I mean, like if you had told me like 10 years ago that 2018 was going to be this pivotal year.
3 years ago.
Right?
You would have told
Even
me
3 years ago.
I was going to be unlocking my face with a dot projector that was doing all this crazy fancy shit on my face. I would have told you, nope, that's not happening.
Nope, that's not happening.
And here we are with not only what Apple does, but with what Vivo can now do.
It is crazy.
In a short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank God, it's like exciting. So now we've got some other things I want to briefly touch about. So Galaxy Note 9 is going to launch on August 9th in New York City. We all got invites in Brooklyn, New
Barclays
York.
Center.
That's kind of cool. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it unless they fly me out there, to be honest with you.
The teaser was a yellow button, but there's a teaser video as well.
Oh, I didn't see it.
It's an S Pen. And the button is the button on the S Pen. So it's not a button on the Note 9, which it looked out of place if it was. Right? And I was thinking, please don't add another button.
Is it gold or yellow?
It's like it's like a canary yellow.
Maybe they're gonna make a yellow Note.
That's all I can come up with.
It's a yellow submarine. Okay, well I might go if they are willing to fly me there, which I doubt. But if not, I will watch from the armchair, as they say. And the other bit of news that I think is interesting is that Qualcomm launched a bunch of new Snapdragon chips in the mid-range, the 632, 439, and 429 chips. And so they're promising, more performance, better feature set. They're pin compatible, I believe, the 429 and 439, which means that theoretically a manufacturer could build one phone with two choices of chip for different price points and not have to change anything on their circuit board, which is really cool.
I love that Qualcomm does these mid-range chips.
I mean, I honestly think Qualcomm, it's maybe a lot of chips right now. It's kind of hard to keep track, but at the same time, you know what? Kudos to them for continuing to push the envelope, because that's, I think, what I love about Qualcomm. It's like, we want to make Windows 10 PCs running on Qualcomm chips, and the 835 wasn't good enough. We'll make a dedicated chip called the 850.
Yeah.
Screw it.
Why not?
I mean, that's kind of how they roll. And I love it. And then the final thing I kind of want to talk to you, and again, this is something that we've both just been reading the news today about, so this is kind of our commentary on this.
But I have a lot to say about this.
I want to hear this. Google Duplex. So apparently a bunch of journalists got invited to Google's, to various Google, I think there was an East Coast one and a West Coast one, but
Sounds like it.
To restaurants where they could interact with Google Duplex, the AI that calls shops, and they could be the waiter and
taking the reservation.
And so what's your takeaway?
Well, reading the couple of articles, it was very clear up front that these were well scripted demos. These weren't just off the cuff, answer the phone and say whatever the hell you want. kind of demos, which kind of doesn't. It's nice that Google's showing it off because they took a lot of criticism after I/O that not a single journalist saw a real demo and the calls were recorded, and there was that whole firestorm after I/O. So it's nice that they're taking steps to proactively tell or demonstrate to journalists what's going on with duplex. But even outside of that, like we're getting closer to it launching. It said it's going to start calling, or they said that duplex is going to start calling and collecting business hours over the next few weeks as they ramp up to release it. But there were some details in the articles about duplex that hadn't really been made public yet. Some of us knew about it, but it just wasn't public, such as businesses can opt out of being part of Google Duplex.
Oh, good.
Or the first thing that the call says is, hey, I'm calling from Google as part of the assistant. I will be recording this call.
But that's interesting to me because you need to ask permission before you say...
Yeah, and I think, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but there was a question in there of, if you want to continue, let's talk. Or they could just hang up, I presume. I don't know. The scripting was... So it makes it clear that I'm recording this call. If you're not cool with it, then end the call.
Right.
But what I think is most interesting, and I during the demo, I couldn't help but think this, and I even voiced it at I/O, is John Legend, right? It was John Legend, got his own voice.
Yeah.
And they used all this fancy machine learning for him to say, like, a quarter of the phrases that were required previously, and then they went out and created the rest of his voice, right?
Yeah.
We talk to Google Home and Google Assistant all the time. They have recordings of our voice.
Yeah, for sure.
How far away are we from having our own
voice
on Google Assistant?
Yeah, right.
But wait, even more, how far away are we from having Google Duplex call, say, a loved one, mom, dad, using our voice and having a conversation with that person?
Oh, creepy.
And then emailing us the footnotes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where this stuff is going. And not necessarily, maybe it is. It's there. The groundwork's there. I don't see how it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But not that I don't want to talk to my mom. I love talking to my mom.
But I mean, like every technology can be misused, right?
But is that a misuse?
Exactly, and that's the question. Is it unethical or not? I don't think it is necessarily unethical. I wouldn't go that far. But I think that, yeah, I mean, it's tricky because, again, consent and disclosure is really critical, I think.
Right, yeah. So if mom picks up the phone, hey, this is Google Assistant calling for Jason, and it's using Jason's voice, yeah.
Weird.
It's very weird.
Oh my God. Weird. This is cool, though. I mean, if you think about it, we live in a crazy time.
And that's all I could think during the entire demo was, holy, I'm going to never have to talk to a person again on the phone if I really don't want to. And then once the John Legend stuff was announced, I was like, wait a minute. They have all my recordings in the cloud.
Right.
This is very easy for them to do at some point if they want to flip that switch.
Yeah.
And, disclosure is the big part of it. And they kind of screwed up in that, right? When they announced it at I/O. I'm excited they're getting closer to launching.
Me too.
But they definitely need to do a better job of communicating.
Yeah.
And they're trying to do that with what came out today. But also in setting proper expectations on both the caller and the receiver's side of things.
It'd be interesting to see how many restaurants opt out and whether it becomes something viable for them, because if they don't get enough traction, then it might not work.
Yeah, and in some conversations I had at I/O with Google people, they view this as helping small town businesses, small businesses in places where maybe OpenTable doesn't exist, or it's too much of a barrier for them to set up OpenTable, where Google Assistant, it makes it too easy for the end user to call and make a reservation, and it benefits them in the end. I don't know if I buy all that, because I could pick up the phone and make my own reservation just as easy,
Hi, I'm Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I'd like to make a reservation at your restaurant. Screw you!
Yeah, right.
Oh, boy. I had to bring that up. Anyway, let's wrap it up. I think I would love you to tell the world where they can find you. As you said, you write for a whole bunch of different publications.
I do. Everyday common laptop reviews for Tech Radar. I do gaming laptop reviews for IGN. I do how-to articles for CNET. iOS 12 has been keeping me insanely busy for the past few weeks. And then I do mobile reviews and news mainly for ZDNet, CNET's sister site. And but mostly like the easiest place to find my work is on Twitter because I pretty much share everything on there.
What's your handle?
Mr. Cippy, MrCippy, Mr. Cippy.
And you have that as Instagram as well?
Instagram, Facebook.
Awesome.
All the places.
You know where to find Jason, and you should read his stuff. It's pretty awesome. And then before I tell you where you find me, because you already know, I should thank our sponsor, Audible.com.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Audible is a place to go if you want to have a book read to you for whatever reason. Say you're driving and you can't read while driving unless you have a self-driving car, and even then, it's not quite good enough for that yet. If you are flying for a long time and maybe your eyes are tired or you want to go to sleep on the plane having the soothing voice of John Legend read you a book, Audible.com. If you want to maybe
go on a run.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. Or maybe, you have a disability and you can't really read very well, or you get tired, or you get migraines from reading. Audible.com. So anyway, you get the idea. They have a lot of books. I think they're probably the leader in audiobooks. I love it. I like to listen to books when I travel on road trips.
Oh, nice.
Jump in the camper van and we just like put on either some podcasts or some audiobooks. As you know, the best way you can support the podcast is go in the show notes and click on the link to support the podcast, the Audible link. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. Click on there and you'll be able to join Audible if you're not a member yet. And we get a little bit of love in exchange. So it's a win-win for everyone.
And every bit helps.
Yeah, for sure. You guys know where to find me. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character Tankgirl, but without the vowels. That's the same on Instagram at TNKGRL. You will find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Miriam Jouar. And that's where you'll find some complimentary videos to this podcast. I basically record unboxings and other reviews and, sometimes some crazy stuff, just to kind of like help you along with the podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, you can watch these videos with the sound off and see like an unboxing of the BlackBerry KEY2, for example. So now you know what it looks like. Jason, thanks so much for being on.
This was fun.
That was
a lot
fun.
of fun. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. So stay tuned for another show soon. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.